All right, so trip coming up. Want to make sure that your airport English is, ready for takeoff?
Oh, yeah.
We did a deep dive into a bunch of YouTube videos, English tutors, everyday conversation experts, all talking about this. And, I was surprised to learn that this is way more than just knowing where's the bathroom.
Much more, yeah.
It really is about feeling confident and prepared for that whole airport experience.
Yeah, start to finish.
Yeah.
From checking in to baggage claim and everything in between.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just assume they can, wing it at the airport. But knowing the lingo beforehand can make such a difference in terms of, feeling confident, avoiding stress.
Huge.
And all the sources we looked at said that pre-flight preparation is key.
It is. And the thing is, you hear words like departure, layover, connecting flight all the time, but do you really know what they mean?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've definitely been confused by those before, especially when I'm dealing with connecting flights. It's like a whole different language.
It is. And knowing what they mean can help you make, smart decisions.
Right.
Like if you have a really tight connection, knowing the difference between a domestic and international flight can be the difference between making your flight or missing it.
Oh, interesting. I always thought it was just about where the plane was going, but it sounds like there's more to it.
There is, because on an international flight, you have to deal with customs and immigration, which can add a significant amount of time to your layover.
Yeah.
Also, things like baggage allowances are different for international flights, and also sometimes even security procedures.
Huh. So understanding these seemingly basic terms can help you avoid missing flights or, paying extra fees or even getting held up in security.
Oh.
And speaking of security, that's another place where knowing the right vocabulary can be super helpful, knowing what to call your carry-on versus checked baggage, or, how to explain if something sets off the metal detector.
Right. Or if you've accidentally packed something you shouldn't have. It's good to know, the specific items that are prohibited or restricted. Things like liquids over a certain size or sharp objects. Knowing the rules can help you avoid any, unpleasant surprises.
Totally. I've definitely had my share of awkward moments trying to explain, why I've got a mini Swiss Army knife in my bag.
Yeah.
And let's not forget packing, right?
Oh, packing. That's a whole other thing.
A whole other thing. Knowing the airline's size and weight restrictions for your carry-on is, important.
Really important. And actually, a lot of the experts had good tips on packing efficiently, like roll your clothes instead of folding them.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, saves a ton of space. And then things like packing cubes and compression bags to keep everything nice and tidy and wrinkle-free.
Yeah, I'm starting to realize packing strategically is a skill.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's something that can just, make your whole airport experience so much better.
Okay, so we talked about pre-flight prep, security. We made it through all that. What happens next?
Next, you got to navigate the airport itself, which can be a little intimidating.
Yeah, especially if it's a large, unfamiliar airport.
Totally. It's a whole maze of terminals and gates and shops. You can get lost so easily.
So easy.
So, knowing your way around is key. Understanding the layout of the airport, knowing key terms like gate, departure lounge, duty-free. You don't want to be that person sprinting to their gate 5 minutes before boarding.
No.
And speaking of gates, sometimes airports have separate gates for domestic and international flights. Some even have different terminals altogether.
I had no idea.
Something to keep in mind. And then you have the departure lounge, which is, it's basically like a big waiting area.
Yeah.
Where everyone's just kind of hanging out before their flight. And that's where all the shops and restaurants are, trying to tempt you to spend money.
Tempting.
And that brings us to duty-free. Knowing what that means and how it works, could save you some money, especially if you're looking for souvenirs or whatever.
Right. I was going to say, duty-free can be dangerous for my wallet, but it's good to know the ins and outs.
For sure. And it's not just about finding your way around. It's about being aware of potential delays or changes. Understanding why flights are delayed.
Right.
Like weather, mechanical issues, air traffic control, all that stuff. It can really help you manage your expectations and avoid getting frustrated.
Oh, for sure. I know I get super impatient when there's a delay, but, understanding the reasons behind it definitely helps me stay calm.
Absolutely. And knowing how to check for updates, either on those airport screens or through the airline app. So you can make other arrangements if you need to.
Okay, so we've talked about pre-flight prep, security, navigating the airport. What about those who are traveling internationally? What should they know about customs and immigration?
Okay, so first of all, Customs and immigration are two different things.
Okay.
Customs is about making sure you're not bringing in anything that's prohibited or restricted, like certain foods or plants or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
Immigration is about verifying your identity and why you're there.
Right.
And both of them can involve a lot of paperwork and long lines.
Ugh, lines.
So for customs, it's important to have your declaration forms filled out correctly and to be ready to answer questions about what you're bringing in. Like, be honest and upfront. If you try to hide something, it could cause major delays.
Yeah.
Or legal trouble. And then for immigration, have your passport and visa ready if you need one. And be prepared to answer questions about your trip.
Like where you're staying, how long you'll be there.
Exactly.
You know, one thing that always makes me nervous is that they might ask me questions in English, and I just don't understand.
That's totally fair. But the experts we talk to all agree that it's fine to ask for clarification. Say something like, could you please repeat that? Or could you speak more slowly?
Good advice.
Yeah. And honestly, the more you practice your airport English, the more comfortable you'll be in those situations.
Makes sense. It's all about building confidence. Okay, so we made it. Through security, navigated the airport, we're on the plane.
We are.
Now what? What kind of English do we need once we're actually, up in the air?
Well, once you're on the plane, there's a whole new set of vocabulary and phrases. You'll hear things like cabin crew, turbulence, overhead bins, that kind of thing. Knowing these will help you understand those announcements they make and know how to interact with the flight attendants.
Right, and you don't want to be that person constantly hitting that call button every time you need something.
Right. It's good to know when it's appropriate to use that and when it's better to just wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
if you need a glass of water or a blanket or something, you can usually just wait for the flight attendant to come by.
Yeah.
But if you're feeling sick or something, then hit that button.
Right. It's about being respectful of their time.
Totally.
And speaking of the flight attendants, knowing how to talk to them politely and effectively is key to having a good flight.
Oh, for sure. Using phrases like, excuse me, could you please, or thank you so much.
Right.
And be familiar with those common requests, like how to ask for a drink or how to adjust the air vent, you'll feel much more comfortable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some of the videos that we watched also talked about, in-flight etiquette, being mindful of your noise level, respecting people's space, using headphones, all that stuff.
Yeah, all important stuff.
Yeah.
Even though it's, technically a public space, you are in very close quarters with a lot of people. So being considerate is just key.
Definitely. One thing I always wondered about was, domestic versus international flights in terms of the food and drinks.
Yeah. So on a lot of international flights, you'll get complimentary meals and drinks, sometimes even multiple courses, depending on how long the flight is. But domestic flights, especially the shorter ones, you often have to pay for all that.
Yeah, and I've noticed some airlines are starting to charge for checked bags, even on domestic flights.
Unfortunately, yeah. Airlines are always finding new ways to, get more money.
Make a buck.
But if you're aware of these policies ahead of time, you can plan accordingly and avoid those extra fees.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to check the airline's website or app before you fly and, just kind of get familiar with their baggage policies and, other things like that.
Absolutely. Be prepared, be informed. That way you can just relax and enjoy the flight.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about communicating with the flight attendants, in-flight etiquette, domestic versus international. What else should we know about the, in-flight experience?
Well, one thing that comes up a lot is turbulence. It's pretty common, especially on longer flights, and it can be a little scary if you're not used to it.
Oh yeah, I get nervous when the plane starts shaking.
And that's totally normal.
Yeah.
But if you understand what it is and why it happens, it can actually be less scary. A lot of the experts explain that it's basically just bumpy air, caused by things like weather patterns, jet streams, even mountains.
So it's not necessarily something's wrong with the plane.
Right. In most cases, it's totally normal. But the key is to just follow the flight attendant's instructions, keep your seatbelt fastened, and try to stay calm.
Good advice.
What about motion sickness? Is that something you struggle with?
Oh, yeah. Especially on turbulent flights.
Yeah. So there are a few things you can do. One thing they recommend is choosing a seat over the wings.
Over the wings, okay.
Yeah, that tends to be the most stable part of the plane.
Yeah.
And avoiding reading or using electronic devices during turbulence. Focusing on a fixed point can also help.
Interesting. I'm always trying to get the window seat so I can look out, but maybe that's not the best idea if I'm feeling queasy.
It might not be. And then if you are really struggling, don't be shy about asking the flight attendant for help. They have motion sickness bags, medication, that kind of thing.
Right. There's no shame in asking for help, especially if it makes you more comfortable.
So,
Okay, so what about jet lag? That's another thing I struggle with when I'm traveling, especially across multiple time zones.
jet lag is rough, and the experts we looked at had some good tips for dealing with it. Things like adjusting your sleep schedule a few days before your trip and staying hydrated, drinking lots of water.
Yeah. I've also heard avoiding caffeine and alcohol can help.
Yes, definitely. Those can dehydrate you and mess with your sleep. And then once you arrive, get some sunlight, try to adjust to the local time as quickly as possible.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about flight attendants, turbulence, jet lag. We've covered a lot. What happens when we finally land at our destination?
Well, then comes the exciting part, getting to explore a new city, a new country.
Yes.
But before we get to that, there's still a few more steps. Disembarking the plane, getting your luggage, maybe going through customs and immigration if you're in a new country.
Yeah, I gotta say, after a long flight, those last steps can sometimes feel like the longest.
They can be, for sure, especially when you're tired and just want to get going.
Exactly. So let's talk about, what kind of English we might need for those final stages.
Let's do it.
All right, the wheels have touched down, we've landed, but like you said, we're not done yet.
Nope. Still a few more hurdles. We got to get off the plane, find our bags, and then maybe even customs and immigration.
Those last few steps, especially after a long flight, they can feel like the longest part.
I know, right? When you're tired and you just want to get to your hotel or wherever you're going.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that. What kind of English do we need to know for these final airport stages?
Well, first things first. When the plane comes to a stop, you'll hear that announcement, disembark. That just means get off the plane.
Ah, okay. And then it's pretty much everyone for themselves trying to get their stuff out of those overhead bins, right?
Yeah, it can be a little chaotic up there. So, just be patient, courteous to the people around you.
Right. And then we follow the crowds, too.
Baggage claim. That's where you'll get any checked luggage.
Fingers crossed our bags are actually there.
Hopefully. But, sometimes bags get lost. So it's good to know how to report a missing bag to the airline, just in case.
Yeah, good point. So some important words to know here would be baggage claim, carousel, where the bags come out, lost luggage, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And have that baggage claim tag handy, the one they give you when you check your bag, just in case you need it.
Okay, got it. So then customs and immigration, you talked about those before. What kind of English might we need there?
Well, customs is usually pretty straightforward. You just declare anything you're bringing into the country, if it needs to be taxed or if there are any restrictions on it.
Like if I'm bringing back like a ton of souvenirs or something.
Exactly. Or alcohol, tobacco, expensive gifts, that kind of thing.
Okay.
You'll fill out a form. Might have to answer a few questions from a customs officer.
What if I don't understand something they ask me?
Don't be afraid to ask them to clarify. Just say, "Excuse me, could you repeat that?" Or, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Simple as that.
All right. And then there's immigration. That always makes me a bit nervous.
Yeah, but it's mostly just about verifying who you are and why you're there. So have your passport ready, your visa if you need one, and be prepared to answer some questions about your trip.
Like where I'm staying, how long I'll be in the country, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Sometimes they ask me for the address of my hotel and I can never remember it exactly.
Happens to the best of us. It's a good idea to have a copy of your hotel confirmation or your itinerary handy, just in case.
Okay, great tip. So basically, be polite, answer their questions honestly, and try not to panic.
Yeah, exactly. They're just doing their job.
Right. Okay, so we've made it. Through baggage claim, through customs, through immigration, we are officially in our destination country. Now what?
Now you got to figure out how to get where you're going. Your hotel or wherever. Might involve taking a taxi, a bus, a train, maybe even a ride-sharing service.
Which probably means a whole other set of English vocabulary to learn. Asking for directions, buying tickets, figuring out how to, use the local transportation.
Yep. And every country's system is different. It can be a little confusing.
Yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of, stressful moments trying to figure out public transportation in a new place.
It's all part of the adventure. You might even pick up a few new phrases along the way.
Right. That's part of the fun of traveling. It pushes us outside our comfort zone and makes us use our, language skills in different ways.
I agree.
Going through all of this, it strikes me that airport English is so much more than just knowing a few basic phrases. It's about being prepared, being flexible, and using language as a tool to, confidently navigate the world.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with people from different cultures and really experiencing all that travel has to offer.
I love that. Well, to all of our listeners out there, as you plan your next trip, remember everything we've talked about today.
Be prepared. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And most of all, have fun.
Safe travels, everyone.